The air in the rusty nebula was thick with the mingled scents of fermented nebula fruit, ozone from a faulty cooling unit, and the faint, lingering psychic residue of 1,000 alien dramas. Jax, the barkeeper, a being of indeterminate species with more wrinkles than a dried space plum and eyes that held the wisdom and cynicism of countless star cycles, polished a grimy glass with a practiced hand. A lone patron, a young, wide-eyed Zithian with shimmering scales that marked him as a recent arrival to this less-than-reputable spaceport, hesitantly approached the counter. Barkeep? I couldn't help but notice the sign outside. Free Quarglian firewater for humans. Is that standard practice around here? Jax chuckled, a dry, rasping sound like space dust shifting in a void. Standard, kid? Nothing standard out here in the Rim. That sign, that's a tale in itself. Pour you something? First drinks on the house. You look like you could use a jolt of reality. He gestured to a stool that looked suspiciously like a repurposed asteroid fragment. The Zithian perched cautiously. Reality? About free drinks for humans? Jax raised a ridged brow. You remember the Trigons, right? The Zithian nodded quickly. Yeah. Heard they ruled the sectors once like a Korok on a feeding frenzy. Real mind-benders. I even heard they ran half the galaxy like it was their personal meditation chamber. They were the galaxy's bully. They were everywhere once, but somehow their civilization declined. Jax let out a low chuckle, the kind that said, you don't even know the half of it. He sighed, setting down the glass and reaching for a bottle of something that glowed faintly green. All right, kid, settle in, because this is how that somehow happened. And you know who changed it? Humans. Want to know how? He paused for dramatic effect, then widened his eyes and said, just by sleeping. The Zithian's eyes glinted with curiosity. By sleeping? Jax poured a measure of the glowing liquid into a cracked tumbler. Yes, this is a story that goes back a few cycles, back when the arrogant glow of the Trigon hegemony still blinded half the galaxy. Psychic bastards they were, thought their mental tricks made them the top of the cosmic food chain. He poured a generous measure. See this bar? It used to cater to all sorts. Trigon dignitaries smugly telepathing their orders. Grolak traders, loud and crass, always shouting over each other about profit margins. Even the occasional ethereal Sylvans drifting in like ghosts, never saying much. But humans, they were. Tolerated. Barely. The Trigon, Jax continued, his voice taking on a low, storytelling cadence. They had it all. Mental shields that could deflect energy weapons, telekinetic abilities that could crush ships, and a superiority complex the size of a gas giant. They ran the United Galactic Coalition, their psychic pronouncements treated as cosmic law. Other species, second-class citizens at best, useful pawns, mostly. Then came the diplomat. A human. Name of doesn't really matter now. Let's just call him Kevin. Ambassador Kevin strolled into Coalition headquarters on Trigon Prime, like he was looking for the nearest coffee shop. Datapad in one hand, a half-eaten protein bar in the other. First time off-world, or so they said, but you wouldn't know it by the way he winked at a seven-eyed customs officer and called the place cozy. Decent guy. Knew how to laugh in the face of bureaucracy, which, frankly, was a skill most species lacked. Jax paused to take a swig of his own murky brew. Initially, nothing much happened. Kevin went about his diplomatic duties, trying to navigate the swirling currents of Trigon mental politics. The Trigon, they mostly ignored him. Pitied him, maybe. A species so mundane, so utterly devoid of the higher senses. Jax leaned in, lowering his voice. But then it started. The very next morning after the human arrived, it hit all at once. Every Trigon from the highest to the lowest felt it, right as the day began. Their teeth started falling out. First it was subtle. A loose tooth here, a small crack there, but it didn't stop. The more they tried to adjust, the worse it got. Trigon officials, mid-ranking bureaucrats, even warriors, each one lost tooth after tooth, as if they were just falling out of their mouths. He shook his head, remembering. Zaroth, one of their top diplomats, was in his bath. He reached up to adjust his hair, and bam, his teeth just started falling out. Panic set in. Kalthor, during breakfast, tried to bite into his meal. No luck. More teeth gone. It was like something had taken them. Jack sighed. You can imagine the chaos. Every one of them was scrambling, trying to get their teeth back. Some even reached for their telepathic shields, trying to fix it, but nothing worked. For a few minutes, they were all helpless. he grinned. Then, like a horror movie character's flashlight, it just stopped. Everything was back to normal. No missing teeth. All that was left was confusion among the Trigons. But they shrugged it off. It was the first time it had ever happened, so they figured it was some strange interference. Didn't even discuss it for long. Just went back to their routines, thinking it was an anomaly they could ignore. But the weird hallucinations continued, mostly at night or in the morning, occasionally midday, and the Holy Highnesses of the Trigons kept dismissing it as stress, inductive telepathic interference, psionic backlash, or any other fancy word they could invent. The Zithian froze mid-sip, his eye ridges twitching. Wait, are you telling me the human, just by dreaming, projected his dreams onto the Trigons? Jax nodded, casually picking at a snack. Yup, just a regular old REM cycle and boom, Trigon dental crisis. But how? How is that even possible? That's telepathic warfare. Jax chuckled. That's the thing. It's not warfare. The human didn't even know it was happening. He just had a stress dream about his teeth falling out. Classic human anxiety stuff. The Zithian leaned forward, flabbergasted. But it only affected the Trigons? Only them, Jax said, grinning. They're the only telepathic species in the galaxy. Everyone else was fine. But the Trigons? Their minds accidentally synced with the human's nightmare. Hallucinations and stuff, like their brains got hijacked by his dreams. But how? Why? Zithian asked. Jax threw his hands up. No clue. Not even the humans know. We ran scans, psychic evaluations, even checked for ancient curses. One human scientist said maybe it's a subconscious frequency overlap. Another said it was bad vibes and coffee withdrawal. One guy blamed it on dairy. Jax chuckled, shaking his head as he reached for a cracked mug and began wiping it with a cloth that had definitely seen better cycles. And there was this time when every Trigon in the coalition had another incident during their morning routine. He set the mug down with a clink and grabbed a fresh bottle from the shelf behind him, popping the seal with a flick of his claw. One of the bureaucrats, just minding his business and getting dressed, suddenly found himself on a starship. No warning, no reason. One moment he's in his bedroom, the next he's standing in the middle of the bridge, trying to figure out how to navigate the damn thing. Thought it was some new form of telepathic training, maybe. Jax filled a small tray with glasses, idly aligning them as he continued. So there he was, panicking, pressing buttons, trying to make sense of the controls. But of course nothing happened. And then, bam, the ship vanished. He was back in his living room. He slid a drink across the bar to another patron who'd just wandered in, not missing a beat. He thought, okay, that's odd, but fine. So he opened the door to get some air, and boom, he stepped right into someone else's house. Someone else's house, like it was a normal thing. A whole room of strangers just stared back at him, probably wondering why a Trigon bureaucrat was in their kitchen. Jax grinned as he polished the bar top with a circular motion, the cloth dragging through a faint green glow of spilled drink. The best part, it happened to every single one of them. No explanation, no sense to it. Jax snorted, shaking his head as he refilled a half-empty glass without even looking. And then there was the assembly incident. Midday session, big one. All the Trigon higher-ups were there, plus a few ambassadors from other species. Even the human, Kevin. He gave the glass a swirl, checked the colour, nodded approvingly, then handed it to the Zithian. Now, Kevin had this habit of dozing off in meetings. Couldn't help it, something about the telepathic ambience, or maybe just the boredom. Anyway, he nods off right there in the middle row. Jax leaned back and grabbed a bottle from a high shelf, stretching as he went on. And the moment his head dipped, boom! Every Trigon in the hall blinked, and suddenly they were all in their own bedrooms, or what they thought were their bedrooms. Same layout, same lighting, except one weird detail. He paused to wipe a spill on the bar with a practiced flick. There was a TV in the room, not something Trigons usually have, right? But there it was, glowing like an old Earth relic. He tapped a finger on the counter for emphasis. And what was playing? The exact audio feed of the assembly meeting. Every word, every speech, every political rant, just blaring from the screen while they stood there in their sleep robes, utterly confused. Jax chuckled, tossing the cloth over his shoulder. Some of them tried to telepathically trace the signal, Others panicked and started fiddling with imaginary remotes. A few just sat on the edge of their phantom beds and stared like the universe had finally broken. He leaned in with a grin. And then, snap, it all vanished. They were back in the chamber, everything normal, Kevin just rubbing his eyes and asking if he missed anything important. He straightened up and went back to wiping a glass. The Trigons? Oh, they shared some nervous glances, muttered something about mass resonance echoes or whatever nonsense they came up with to explain it away. But you could see it in their eyes. They were rattled. He leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. Now at first, they thought it was a prank. Maybe some upstart Trigon decided to mess with the assembly by bending the psychic field a little. You know, get a rise out of the old council. Jax snorted, nearly choking on a laugh. That theory lasted about 20 seconds. Why? Because every Trigon is so uptight they squeak when they blink. Pranks? Beneath them. Even suggesting one was like farting during a funeral. The idea that any of them had a sense of humour? Instantly dismissed. Jax grabbed a cracked mug and filled it with something that gurgled slightly when poured. Then came panic. They assumed it had to be a virus, some kind of mimetic attack, so they locked the chamber down, full mental scan protocols, bioneural scrubs, even tried to deep sync their cognitive nodes. He shook his head slowly, clearly enjoying the memory. Nothing. No bugs, no traces, no intrusion. Nada. Everything came up clean, but it kept happening. Every now and then, bam, they'd flicker back into that dream state. Bedroom, TV, assembly audio, like their minds were syncing with someone else's dream channel. Jax chuckled darkly. Eventually, some of the high-caste Trigons started whispering that maybe it wasn't a prank or a virus. Maybe they were under attack, a subtle invasion, a weapon that hit them where they were supposed to be strongest, the mind. He poured himself a shot and tossed it back. So they deployed countermeasures, layered psychic shielding, memory lockdowns. No effect. Whatever this was, it slipped past everything. Didn't even leave a psychic fingerprint, like a shadow you can't turn around to see. He leaned in, eyes gleaming. And Kevin? Still snoring in the back, drooling on his sleeve. When he woke up, he just blinked, looked around, and asked why the Trigons were sweating. The Zithian, still nursing his glowing drink, tilted his head. But didn't the Trigons realize it was the human, even after all that? I mean, sounds like his dreams were affecting them. Wouldn't that be obvious? Jax let out a dry laugh, more air than sound, as he tapped the rim of a glass with a spoon, letting it ring faintly. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But nah. Trigons were too damn arrogant to even consider it. He grabbed a rag, wiped the already clean corner of the bar, and leaned forward, voice lowering conspiratorially. See, to them, humans were background noise. An interesting little species, if they were feeling generous. The idea that some insignificant human from Earth could rattle the mighty Trigon hegemony? Please. That was like blaming a sneeze for knocking over a mountain. Jax straightened, waving a hand theatrically. These were the same Trigons who made entire empires kneel with a flick of psychic pressure. There was one species, Grokars, more advanced in tech than the Trigons ever were, had to bend the knee after a single mass telepathic incursion. Whole civilization snapped like a twig. They were so wrapped up in their own psychic superiority, the idea that a non-psychic could be the source of these anomalies never even crossed their minds. They ran diagnostics, consulted their most powerful mind healers, even blamed it on solar flares. He poured himself another shot of the glowing green stuff, raising the glass like a toast. So yeah, the Trigons didn't believe it was possible. Not yet, at least. He downed it in one gulp and let the silence hang, just long enough to make the Zithian shiver. Jax leaned forward, his voice dropping into a low, steady cadence as he recounted the next phase of the strange, eerie tale. Then it happened one night, Jax said, his eyes glinting as though the story still thrilled him. The sky for the Trigon delegates turned red. Suddenly, the skies of Trigon Prime were bathed in an unsettling glow, like the universe itself was bleeding out its colours. The Trigon diplomats, the big shots, the ones who thought they had it all under control, found themselves in a place they couldn't understand. They were standing in a dark, cold corridor, one that stretched endlessly into oblivion, like a labyrinth of their own minds. He paused for a moment, as if savouring the suspense. At the end of the corridor, a creature. A small, innocent thing, curled up, maybe a foot tall, looked almost cute. It wasn't moving, just sitting there with eyes that shined like little stars in the dark. But the moment they approached it, well, that's when the nightmare really kicked in. Jax leaned in closer to the Zithian, making sure to capture his full attention. The creature? It grew, not just bigger and darker. As it expanded, its body became nothing but shadow, the kind of shadow that doesn't reflect light. Its eyes, glowing red, bloodshot, filled with malice. It was no longer cute. The sight sent chills down their spine. It was something that belonged in the darkest corners of the galaxy, something that should never have existed outside a nightmare. Yet here it was. A smile flickered on Jax's face, one that was equal parts amusement and dark knowledge. And that's when they tried to run. The Trigon diplomats, those big, powerful telepaths who thought they were untouchable, started paddling their legs like terrified insects, but went nowhere. No shields, no powers, just that slow-motion, useless sprint you get in a nightmare, pure panic, zero escape. Jax looked the Zithian straight in the eyes, and suddenly, where did they end up, you ask? On a rooftop. That's right, out of nowhere. They were standing on a rooftop in some godforsaken city. The shadow monster chasing them, getting closer, its massive limbs stretching across the skyline, its glowing red eyes boring into their very souls. He let the image settle for a moment before continuing, and just as they were about to be consumed by the creature, bam, they fell, plummeted like a dream gone wrong from the edge of the roof into the abyss below. The fall was endless. That was when the hallucinations ended abruptly, back in their rooms, safe. Jax's voice darkened, and he leaned back against the bar with a long exhale. But it wasn't over. For some of the Trigons, it was only the beginning. He paused, watching the Zithian's expression shift, tension building in the air around them. Some of the Trigons who'd been in that nightmare, they couldn't handle it. Their minds snapped. They began convulsing, seizures that rattled their whole bodies. Others were disoriented, dripping sweat, screaming like they stubbed their pinky toe on a coffee table. It was a nightmare that had invaded their very souls. And worst of all, they couldn't escape it. The terror was still there, even though the vision was gone. Jax leaned in closer, the edge of his voice sharp with the finality of the tale. And then Kevin, the human, the one who was so insignificant to the Trigons. He stepped out of his room, probably to check the commotion outside. Saw a Trigon ambassador, one of the high ones, standing there, shaking and screaming. So Kevin walked up and just casually asked, "Hey, are you having a nightmare too?" Jax chuckled darkly, his voice lowering even further. And then, without waiting for an answer, Kevin said, "Man, I had the weirdest dream. I was chased by this monster and I fell off a roof." Jax leaned forward, the flickering barlight casting deep shadows across his cracked features. His voice dropped into a gravelly near whisper, the kind barkeeps use when they know the story's about to punch someone in the soul. And that was the moment it hit them, like a realization that you've been strutting around with your zip open. He tapped the bar with a claw, slow and rhythmic. "You should have seen their faces, kid. Imagine a room full of smug millennia-old psychic overlords, all of them suddenly realizing they'd been infiltrated. Not by a rival power, not by some hypertech virus. No, by Kevin. Sleepy, snack-carrying Kevin from Earth. A bipedal anxiety generator with a caffeine addiction and a browser history full of conspiracy theories." Jax chuckled, low and bitter. They didn't scream. Oh no, that would have been dignified. What they did was worse. One Trigon puked his own mind into the air, collapsed, convulsing, like his thoughts had tried to climb out of his skull to escape the shame. Another tried to block the dream retroactively, like he could psychically time travel and slap Kevin awake before the nightmare began. He failed, obviously. Ended up catatonic, stuck in a mental loop of reruns from Kevin's subconscious. Poor bastard was trapped watching Earth commercials for toothpaste and fast food for days. He paused, letting the horror marinate in silence. And then the panic really kicked in. One of the high anchors, you know, the crusty ones that float more than walk, she actually wept, said, and I quote, "The walls of thought have been breached by the sleeper of soul." They started calling him that. The sleeper. Like he was some dark myth made flesh. Not because of what he did, but because he didn't even try. Jax gestured with his glass, sloshing the glowing drink like holy water. That was what shattered them. The idea that the most disciplined psychic minds in the galaxy got steamrolled not by intent or power, but by a random involuntary nightmare from a being they didn't even consider sentient enough to guard against. The Zithian's eyes were wide as star rings. That's insane. Jax nodded solemnly. That's humans, kid. No telepathy, no mind shields, just meat-brained, hormone-soaked chaos factories. And the Trigons? Turns out for all their power, they were just giant antennae, tuned to the wrong frequency. One human, one dream. That's all it took to knock over the tower of psychic babble. Jax leaned back, the glow of his drink fading as if it too understood the punchline was near. After that little psychic nuke went off, he said, voice low, the Trigons suddenly remembered Kevin existed. You know, Kevin, the guy they'd forgotten existed, assuming he was a biological Roomba or some kind of warm-blooded houseplant. Yeah, that Kevin. He tapped the bar with one finger. Every high anchor in the room was laser-focused on him, not with hate, but with fear, even reverence, like a toddler who just accidentally summoned an elder god by burping. The Trigon, for all their arrogance, weren't stupid, Jax said, pouring another drink. They understood the implications. If a normal nightmare could do that, what would happen if Kevin had a truly horrific one? Could it shatter their minds entirely? Could it unravel the very fabric of their reality? Zithian blinked. What did they do to him? The next few hours were frantic. Treaties were drafted, concessions were made, and every demand Ambassador Kevin had politely submitted in the past was suddenly met with enthusiastic agreement. They practically threw resources and trade deals at him, just to get him and his potent subconscious off their planet. They signed every agreement he brought. Every demand Ambassador Kevin had politely submitted in the past was suddenly met with enthusiastic agreement. I bet they didn't even read them. Jax spoke, amused. I heard, Jax continued, a wry smile playing on his lips, that the signing ceremony was the fastest in galactic history, then got him on the next shuttle out. No ceremony, no farewell, just a gentle wave and a whispered prayer that he wouldn't take a nap on the way back. Zithian's spines twitched. And that was it. Jax leaned back, took a breath, then continued, voice lazy with grim amusement. No, it didn't stop there. Word got out. Turns out every human can do it. All of them. No training, no effort. You put one of those jittery little bipeds near a Trigon enclave and boom, free existential crisis. They were welcomed, especially on worlds bordering Trigon space. Having a human around became a sort of psychic repellent, a walking, dreaming deterrent. By the end of the month, humans were on every diplomatic roster, invited to stations, honored at summits, and wherever a human went. The Trigons pulled out, just packed up and skedaddled. They'd gone from the galaxy's mightiest telepathic overlords to the punchline of every intergalactic tavern joke. The most arrogant species in the galaxy, brought down not by military might or secret tech, but by their own damn telepathy. Turns out their telepathic power was their worst enemy. So, when you ask how to defeat the galaxy's most powerful species, just let the humans sleep. And yes, that little sign? Jax grinned, slow and crooked. Free Quaglian firewater for humans. It's not generosity, kid, it's insurance.